So right now, the Are You Doing Enough campaign is online, and all the resources are available through the web page. And this is the website, and I will put it in the chat so that you guys have access to it. And that way, if you want to go on and kind of look at the resources afterwards and familiarize yourself with the website, you can do that as well. So again, are you doing enough to protect your children from secondhand smoke and e-cigarettes? So we will kind of discuss the e-cigarettes as well. I know that's a very popular topic for most people. They want to kind of understand, how are e-cigarettes impacting as well, because it seems like there's an increase in that and maybe sort of a decrease in the tobacco usage. So we're going to start off with a video. Just so that you can understand. And I think the video is very telling of what it's like in kind of where we've come from. So in the past, secondhand smoke exposure, it was just common. And before we had the Clean Indoor Air Act, you would go out to eat and what would happen? They'd say smoking or non-smoking. And I'm sure you guys can probably remember when that was the case. And so when you would walk in, even if you were with your children, you'd say, well, non-smoking. Then you would go and sit down to eat, but the non-smoking was right next to the smoking, and there was a really ever non-smoking. And I think that this picture is kind of like, it's telling of that, but it's more of like the family unit, that we may not recognize how the smoke may be impacting the people around us when we do smoke. So I'll just start the video, and you can get an idea.
Are you doing enough to protect your child from secondhand smoke? Secondhand smoke can trigger an asthma attack in a child.
So again, talking about asthma, and also I think when we look at culturally, right, if we look at this as well, I know growing up, it was really difficult for me. I had asthma growing up, and I was exposed to secondhand smoke exposure, and it was really hard for me to tell the adults, like, don't smoke, because I came from a culture where the adults, you just didn't say those things. And so you just dealt with whatever was there. And I'll ask you if you can mute yourself if you just joined us. And so when we're exposed to secondhand smoke, we're, as children, we don't have a voice. And so I always feel like this campaign is really about helping children have a voice when they're around family members, especially their elders, and especially when it's really difficult to say, can you please not smoke around me? And so I think that it gives them a voice and a support, and also for other family members to kind of let them know. So we're gonna come here now. What's really nice about this is that there's tools for children. So if you're ever working with, let's say you're working with a family, and that's part of your work, and you're talking about the secondhand smoke exposure, that question does come up, or the child has asthma, or you're working and you ask if they smoke, or it's part of your intake forms or part of the process that you work with. They have some tools on here that you can provide the family, which I think is really nice. So one of them is taking a pledge. And it's having the parents just do a little bit more, right, to adopt a kind of, they call it tobacco-free rules, right? And it could be their own policy. So it's like, kind of like the parents have their own policy for what secondhand smoke exposure would look like in the house, or smoking, right? Like, we're going to smoke outside the house rather than in the house. we're going to do better by not smoking in the car with the children. So part of, again, my story, which I'll interweave into this too, is that when I was a child, they would do something called hotboxing me. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that, but they would have all the windows up and all the smoke, and I would just be inhaling all of it. And so we're asking them to take, a pledge to do more, which is not smoke at all in your home or your car around the children. And this is what the pledge card looks like. And they would sign it. So protect your child, take the pledge, smoke-free home and car pledge. And then you would pledge to protect the children from secondhand smoke by making, their home and their car smoke-free. And then we do know, and they says there is no safe amount of secondhand smoke exposure. And this is true. So the off-gassing, right? The first inhale, the exhale. And so it's preventable is what it is. And secondhand smoke can be a detriment to some people, especially people that have sensitivity, lung sensitivity, especially children with asthma. And we'll kind of go over what happens when a child is exposed to secondhand smoke. And then there are tips on how to protect your child. And so, I love this little drop-down box, right? So you can adopt tobacco-free rules. So if you were working with the family, you could say, well, the child has asthma, and if they're exposed, what can we do? How can we minimize maybe their days, if they're calling in sick to school because they're having more asthma days, or even now that, COVID is happening, maybe they're living in an apartment complex where the neighbor smokes or the family smokes, and they're being even more exposed to it. And we'll go over some of the other issues that happen as children are exposed to secondhand smoke. So what can we do? And there's a whole other piece to it as well in terms of how we can protect children if, let's say, they're living in an environment where it's an apartment building, but the parent's not smoking, but the neighbor is. There's ways to deal with that as well. And there's resources as well that we'll go over in a little bit. So, and that's one of them, is to post a sign or a decal. So this is really useful. The signage and the decal is really useful for family members that might come around and smoke. So for instance, let's say their grandfather or uncle come over and they're smokers, and the parents don't want to tell, the grandfather or the uncle, like, hey, you can't smoke in here because it's an uncomfortable conversation. And we've heard this before over and over again. And what we do is we say, we'll put a decal that's like, this is a smoke-free environment. And that's kind of like a signal to them. And we do have those resources available. I'll show you them as we go further, that they can post a sign up. And that could help if they're living, let's say, in an apartment complex. Maybe they put a sign on the door that says, this is a smoke-free house. And it gives an idea of that, oh, why, what's going on? Maybe we shouldn't smoke around here. And now, most people do have a policy that it needs to be 25 feet away, but not all apartments have this policy. And the conversation of having it with family members is hard for some individuals. So that is kind of a way to trigger them and kind of let them know, like, it's not okay to smoke around here. So you could create a place that's smoke-free and vape. We'll see a video here where the mother talks about how she disconnects from the house now after she found out. And a lot of it is the parents themselves are just maybe not aware or not educated. And so for us, it's about really educating the individual about the impacts of secondhand smoke exposure, because then after they're like, oh, okay, I didn't realize that it was harming my child as bad as it is. And so maybe now I can take a pledge to do that as well. So remove the ashtrays from your home, store the cigarettes, e-cigarettes out of easy reach. And so I would say this, the e-cigarette stuff, the e-juice, the vape juice that's in there is very concentrated with nicotine, to the point that if anybody ingested it, an adult would get very sick, a child, and this has happen, can pass away from that juice. So it's very important to educate parents that may be using vape pens, especially around children, that they keep it out of reach. It's very poisonous, very toxic, and it's very concentrated amounts of nicotine in there. And in fact, when I was at the legislature one time, and we were somebody got up, did testimony, and their testimony was, in fact, that a child had drank it, and they ended up passing away. They couldn't, they couldn't save them because they're very toxic, as you can see. If they're swallow absorbed the skin, right? It's very hazardous for children and adults. And then also you can contact your care provider for the quit line to help quit smoking completely. And that, so this later on at the end of the campaign, it does still, the end goal is to get people to consider quitting smoking. And this may be the first step, is really be mindful of the children. And this is the main goal of the campaign, but we do have the resources for 1-800-QUIT-NOW if the parent does want to quit smoking. And then we have the storybook, which I love this storybook, and I think it's culturally relevant. They did some research before they put this book together, Department of Health, and it's about just two children. I think the artist is a local artist in New Mexico, but I just think it's such a beautiful depiction. The colors are beautiful. I think children would love it, but it's really what it is. It's them trying to say, hey, how do we open up the dialogue to our elders to quit smoking? How do we talk about this as children without feeling like we're being disrespectful? Because we're not. We're just trying to. So you can see it's such a beautiful story. And so, it's a birthday and Grandpa's coming over. He's a smoker. And so, and then the story, it goes on and on, but just a beautiful book. And so, and I think that the Department of Health has a few of these, but they really want to give them to those who are maybe working with families, that really want to or will utilize them to give them away. But you can just see the artistry on this is really, it's culturally relevant to New Mexico. And so that we have that resource. And then materials for a smoke-free environment. Here is the signage that I was talking about. And so again, we have it in English and we have it here in Spanish. And so no smoking, right, including electronic cigarettes. So that's the message, because there's this idea behind, if I'm doing electronics cigarettes, I'm not a smoker. And that's kind of been the mindset. The tobacco companies are very, very, very skilled at marketing. And I would say they have some of the most intelligent people on their marketing teams, where people have the mindset that electronic cigarettes is not smoking. It's vaping and it's different. But we do know that with the electronic cigarettes, that the amount of nicotine being administered into the body is not determined. Like people don't 100% know what the concentrates are, and nicotine is in there. So sometimes individuals could be taking, one puff of an e-cigarette, and that's like a whole carton of cigarettes, or not a whole carton, a whole pack of cigarettes. So there is no safe amount, and it's different in the fact that it's called vape. So people think, oh, well, it's vaping, it's not smoking, it's different. But we know that that's not the case. And then so you could download the storybook as well. This is another resource if you wanted to do that. But again, I believe the Department of Health does have some of these books. If you're interested in them, you can just let us know, and then we can get you some resources to that. So here's some statistics. If you can see, only 1 in 5 parents use e-cigarettes have strictly enforced vape-free policies in their home, in their car. Again, this goes to the mindset that it's, the vaping, and that's why they're like, oh, it's okay. They're going to be fine. And you kind of see it. I know that I was driving down the road a few times, not just the other day, but people in their car just, and then puff everywhere. And it's even come into my own car because it travels so far and the clouds are so huge and big. And so there's that mindset around it again, that it's not bad, but it does emit, I believe, bigger puff clouds than cigarettes themselves. In New Mexico, 1 in 3 high school youth and 1 in 4 middle school youth. And that's alarming, right? 1 in 4 middle school youth are exposed to secondhand smoke. Secondhand smoke contains more than 7,000 chemicals, so that can cause cancer. Here's the sources if you want to go and find out where these sources are. Usually CDC, is where we source from. But again, 7,000 chemicals, carcinogens that are cancer causing. And I do want to say this, and I probably should say this at the beginning, this is talking about commercial tobacco. Ceremonial tobacco is a whole other topic. And perhaps eventually we'll have some information about that as well for training, so that if you guys were interested in knowing about that distinction, we can provide that information to you. But we're talking about commercial tobacco. And so they put extra chemicals in there. It's quite alarming, and you could just see a list of them, and none of it is good for you to inhale. Anything, in your lungs is not good, right? So, and then this is a parent's guide, and we'll watch this in just a second. And then even though you can't smell the cigarette smoke, the e-cigarette vape can still harm your child. And then again, there's hazardous chemicals that are released into the air. One thing that can cause asthma, lung problems. And then that was the other thing I said, there's other health issues, ear infections as well. And the big one that always shocked me when I found out is SIDS, right? Sudden infant death syndrome can be caused by secondhand smoke. So a baby being exposed, I just think that, God, it would be, I just think about a child being exposed, and then that's the reason that, they pass away, is because of the, the secondhand smoke, and it could have been prevented. And so that's why we educate parents, even parents who may be going to conceive a child. We say, hey, if you're a smoker, we ask that you take this pledge, and here's why, for the protection of the baby. And then ear infections. I used to get, and I didn't make the connection until I started doing tobacco prevention, but I used to get a lot of ear infections when I was little. And it wasn't my parents that smoked around me. It was my uncles and aunts. And again, I had no voice. So it's really, how do we open up the dialogue, or let the kids have the dialogue from a respectful place to say, hey, this can be harmful to me. And the e-cigarette is not harmless, right? Again, the nicotine gets released into the air as well. It can harm brain development in children and young adults. So we just know that nicotine is a very toxic chemical, not chemical, but a toxic plant if it's used incorrectly. And for commercial use. And then the added chemicals, which it's not just nicotine, there's other chemicals that are added to it, just make it hazardous to health all around. So we have secondhand smoke. Where can we get hard copies of the storybook? Thank you for your questions. And I'll take these questions and then I'll put them together, and then we'll do a follow-up at the end. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Mary. Secondhand smoke, what it means to you. And so we have this book, which is, I used to use this when I was actually doing my this Smoke-Free at Home program. And it's part of the Surgeon General. And so it just kind of goes over what secondhand smoke does. And again, there's no safe amount. So again, what is secondhand smoke? When a person is near you, you breathe secondhand smoke. And then it also goes into third hand. They don't address the third hand smoke, but that's what's left over, the residue that's left over after secondhand smoke settles down, and the chemicals stay. So there's no safe amount, as we said. We talked about SIDS, right? It can cause sudden infant death syndrome. And they're more likely to have ear infections, again, asthma and lung problems. It can cause heart disease, lung cancer. And then there's no separate no smoking sections do not protect you from secondhand smoke. We talked about that earlier when I said, when we first didn't really understand the impacts of cigarettes, right? And this was in the recent past. I mean, I was exposed. So even in the 80s, so I was born in the 80s and then throughout, but before that, people were smoking right in the offices, and it was everywhere. It was everywhere. And they thought, oh, well, the protection is even in apartments, right? They're like, well, they're next door. It doesn't, but that's not true, because the air quality, right? The air ducts, everything's interconnected. And so the smoke is going through that. And also working with a woman who was like, well, I don't know if I need any kind of help with this smoke stuff. But then we started talking, come to find out that her neighbor, they were smoking right outside the window of their office space, and it was impacting some of the employees internally because it was coming in. So there's ways, and we say 25 feet away from any entryway. But if it could be further away, that would be great. Or, if we can get them to maybe think about quitting smoking, that's even better, right? But it doesn't help. Secondhand smoke, it doesn't just go away because there's a wall separating you. That's not necessarily true. So there's been laws that have been put into place that have protected, and the Clean Indoor Air Act was one of those here in New Mexico, which is really awesome. And we do have people that are working on different legislation, like increased tobacco tax increase and stuff like that, to help for more protections. And then we do have the Smoke Free at Home program that supports, the children. So there's so many resources available. So we know that it contains poison, and here we go. It's cancer causing. So I love this picture here. It just shows the chemicals, and it shows some of the chemicals that are in here. So you can just kind of, if you want to go back and take a look at this book as well. And I believe they may be offering this particular book. Some of the partners, and perhaps the Smoke Free at Home program still offers this book up if you guys were interested as well in that. Some of the really interesting, cool things that we have, and everything is in Spanish, by the way. If you go up here and you click Spanish, we do have Spanish resources as well. So if you're working with families that speak Spanish. And then secondhand smoke printable activities. So we have activities for the children, and I think that's really kind of neat. I know children, I remember being a kid and just loving to do stuff like this. I even think adults like to do it, to be honest with you. So, we have these activities for the children, word finds, and they can do this. So that's one activity. Again, we have the e-cigarettes, which is, know the risk. And I think that this website is pretty impactful. I know people are really interested in, like I said, the e-cigs because people are using them. And so you get the facts about them. And so this is interesting. It kind of just will give you an idea of how they work. And you guys can go and kind of look and see how the youth are using them. And I will say this for the tobacco companies, their target market are the youth. If you're not smoking by the time you're 21, you're probably not going to smoke or become a smoker. So they really target the youth. And I think that e-cigarettes has been, I think that what they've done is they've enticed the youth using stuff like Fruity Loops as some of the, things that are catchy that children like. They're like, ooh, Fruity Loops. I want to try the Fruity Loops. And, all the names that they have, Lemon Drop or whatever they have for these juices. So they kind of hook them in. And really, at the end of the day, they want them to become cigarette users more than vape users. So it's almost like a two-pronged thing that we're tackling here, because they've sort of been like like I said, they're very smart. They've come at us at both angles, and who knows what technology is going to develop later on as well. That's the storybook. And then we have a toolkit, which we'll go over in a minute, and we'll watch this video.
I had to like get away from the smoke real quick because I felt like if I didn't, I would like stop breathing for a minute.
My chest gets tight and I feel like my lungs are squeezing together and I can't really breathe.
It feels like my heart is beating really fast.
No, it feels like you're under the water and you can breathe.
Many of us already know that smoking cigarettes is bad for your health. It causes cancer, heart, and breathing problems. But sometimes we don't think how cigarette and cigar smoke might also be hurting someone else, like your children.
Problems that children can develop if they're exposed to cigarette smoke or secondhand smoke includes problems like respiratory tract infections, including bronchitis and pneumonia. They can also experience ear infections as a result of secondhand smoke, and they can also have more asthma symptoms and more asthma attacks if they're exposed to secondhand smoke.
Secondhand smoke is the smoke that comes from the burning end of a cigarette or cigar. It's also the smoke breathed out by a smoker. When someone breathes in this secondhand smoke, it can be just as harmful as actually smoking.
I've seen children have very severe asthma attacks after having an exposure to secondhand smoke, attacks that were so bad that they required hospitalization in our intensive care unit.
Secondhand smoke can also cause lung cancer and heart attacks in adults who do not smoke. There are more than 4,800 different chemicals and gases in secondhand smoke. 250 of them are toxic and act as poisons in the body. These include arsenic, cyanide, and carbon monoxide in a deadly combination. It is not something that anyone, especially children, should be breathing.
We estimate that 43% of children between the ages of 2 and 11 years are exposed to secondhand smoke. We also know that 40%, that's nearly half, of children who end up in the emergency department because of asthma problems are exposed to secondhand smoke.
Secondhand smoke in the home is especially harmful to children. Those who live in homes where people smoke get sick more often with coughs, breathing problems such as asthma, and ear infections. They're more likely to miss days of school. And children whose parents smoke are twice as likely to become smokers themselves.
They told me that secondhand smoke will trigger his asthma if and we smoke around him, anything but we smoke outside.
Very young children commonly have lots of viral infections, but if those same children, let's say children less than 2 years of age, are living in a home with a smoker, they're also going to be susceptible to having more wheezing, more shortness of breath, more difficulty handling those viral infections. And parents don't realize it, but sometimes when kids have these symptoms separate from a viral infection, these could be the early warning signs of asthma. And if there's a smoker in the home, it's very likely that secondhand smoke is the trigger for their young child's symptoms.
According to the Environmental Protection Agency, an estimated 1 million children with asthma have their condition made worse by breathing secondhand smoke.
We've had a few pretty scary instances where I'm driving to the emergency room and she's turning blue on me just because she can't breathe.
My asthma started acting up, and when we arrived at the emergency room, I couldn't breathe at all.
Estaba yo sola con el niño y pues ya tenía 15 días el niño enfermo, ¿verdad? Como a los 4 años. Estaba ya con... Él se dormía, pero yo tenía que estarlo viendo porque era el momento en que el asma le prendió más fuerte. Decía, papi, ¿qué tienes? Nada, pero él respiraba. Y las costillas de aquí se le subían y se le bajaban, se le subían y se le bajaban. Y yo lloraba.
We know that secondhand smoke causes premature death both in children and non-smoking adults. It causes heart disease and lung cancer, and children can be born with or can develop asthma, respiratory tract, and ear infections.
People have a lot of misconceptions about secondhand smoke. A lot of people think that it's okay to be exposed to a little bit, but a lot of exposure is bad. That's not really true. Even a small amount of exposure can be harmful. People also think that it's okay to smoke in the home or in the car as long as the window is open, but that's not true either. You're still going to expose that child to some smoke, and the smoke can linger in the home or in the car, even in the fabric and the furniture and the car seats for a long time. People also think it's okay to smoke as long as their child isn't home, or maybe when their child is asleep in bed. But that's also not a good idea because the smoke can linger in the household for a long time.
I have to tell my family and my friends, don't smoke around him because it will trigger his asthma.
When someone smokes inside a home or any enclosed space, everyone inside breathes the secondhand smoke. Babies are especially at risk, and mothers who smoke while pregnant are more likely to have their babies born with breathing problems or worse.
Smoking during pregnancy is a very dangerous thing. Research has shown that mothers who smoke during their pregnancy have babies who are at increased risk to die of sudden infant death syndrome, which is a very severe problem and can occur without warning.
Make your home and your car smoke-free. Be sure wherever you take your child is smoke-free. If you smoke, do it outside the home in an open area away from children. When out in public, make a point to go only to non-smoking places.
It's not so much about being confident about asking someone to not smoke. You're doing it for the benefit of your child's health. And anything that's going to benefit your child from not being sick or to not trigger them into an attack shouldn't raise any problems within yourself to ask somebody to stop, or within your friends and family, because if they care about you, they'll respect your wishes and your child and not do it around them.
If people are smoking, ask them to please not smoke in your home or car, and teach your children how to avoid secondhand smoke.
My recommendations for parents are to designate their home as being smoke-free, to remove lighters and ashtrays from their home, to put up stickers or reminders that their home is smoke-free, and that they shouldn't smoke in the car either.
If your child has trouble breathing or shortness of breath, talk to a doctor.
Doctors had lectured me and warned me about the effects of secondhand smoke on asthmatics, and for the sake of my daughter, I felt it was beneficial for me to quit smoking, for hers and my benefit.
For more information about secondhand smoke and quitting smoking, talk to your doctor, nurse, or healthcare provider, or call 1-800-QUIT-NOW, or visit these websites. Keeping a smoke-free home can help improve your health, the health of your children, and your community.
I've said, Dad, can you please stop smoking? If I could do one thing, it was to tell my dad and my brother that don't smoke no more.
I would wish for my mom to stop smoking so her and me can get better.
So a couple of things from that. So before or prior to the secondhand smoke exposure, that's all there was secondhand smoke. And recently, third-hand smoke. And I know that in this video, she says that it can linger after secondhand smoke goes away, that it can linger for a long time. And one thing that I'm very grateful for is I was talking to one of the doctors who was doing research on third-hand smoke. Again, that's the particles that settle after the smoke is, you're done smoking and the particles settle in, is that you don't get rid of third-hand smoke. And this is a secondhand smoke campaign, but just to keep you aware of it, there is information and research that has been done on third-hand smoke. So it doesn't go away. She said there's not a way to get rid of it. It doesn't just stay for a little bit of time. It never goes away. And part of that research, and when I was working even in the Smoke Free at Home program, was looking at when a person smoked in the home, and they had to come in and restore the house, rehabilitate it, that when they painted the walls even, sometimes the carcinogens would seep out of the wall again, depending on how much they smoked in the home. So the particles that are left behind, and they're the most toxic, don't leave, they stay. And so it can still impact the individual even after the fact. And then I think another thing to consider after watching the video is that a parent decided to quit smoking. And that's the ultimate goal, is to say, how do we support these individuals if they want to quit, and provide the resources to them as well. And then, or to start the conversation about, hey, how do we communicate again with the individuals around us, like our uncles or our family members or people that we love, not to shame them, right? This is not about shaming people, but to just educate them, like, I can't be exposed to this. I really, when I was young, I wished I had this training, or I wish that I had somebody who would advocate for me, but back then it was just not known. And so it was just go ahead. And I missed days of school. And that's another thing, is that children tend to miss more days of school when they, asthma, or when somebody is, when they're exposed to secondhand smoke exposure. If they have asthma, they'll miss school even more. So you heard that it just really is a detriment to their health. And it keeps them out of school. And I think it's timely to, when we talk about with COVID and everything, I'm sure you guys are just being bogged down with the COVID stuff in your line of work, but that's a respiratory virus, right? They talk about respiratory. So imagine a child who may have been going through COVID, or even an elder or somebody, and then being exposed to secondhand smoke as well. I mean, that's just like a double whammy. So lungs are important. I think that's that's what we're saying here. Lungs are important, and protecting the children is super important. They do have a website, a Facebook that you guys can actually like if you're on Facebook. And so it's right here. And then they just post some information about the Are You Doing Enough campaign, right? If you take care of your children in your home, do not allow anyone to smoke there. Do not let babysitter, family, friends smoke around your children. So they have these messages, right? They'll just put out some information. So if you guys want, you can go on and like it. And I think they're just constantly updating information and messaging around it. The low birth rate and all that with the child as well. And so here's just some more information. Like here, they're being hospitalized and lower respiratory tract infections, right? Causes the respiratory tract infections. So this is the vaping, right? Switching from smoking to vaping doesn't protect. We talked about that prior. And the products contain nicotine. They possess, dangers for the youth, pregnant women, and the fetus as well. So it's unsafe. And there's some facts here. So kids who are around secondhand smoke, they get sick more often, as it said before, the wheezing, the coughing. They get infections just the same way. Again, the aerosol from e-cigarettes is not harmless vapor. And that, again, I just want to keep saying that, because people will tell you this, and they feel like they're like, but even vapor in your lungs is not good. But there's chemicals in it. And they say, well, no, we're doing, this doesn't have chemicals. And they had done some studies where they took some of these, they went around and they got the vapes and they asked about the concentrate, and they did a study, and there's just no regulation on how much nicotine concentrations in those. There's not a regulation. There's not a rule. How would you even regulate it? Sometimes the juices are being made in, someone's garage and being sold. So there's not a huge regulation around it. And so it makes it really hard to say, well, what are they even really putting in? What else are they putting in it? Nicotine is addictive. Nicotine is so addictive, and I will say that if you haven't had any kind of background on nicotine's addiction, it is one of the hardest things for individuals to quit is nicotine. I know that right now I'm working with some individuals who are in recovery and may have stopped, alcohol or other drugs, but nicotine is something that they haven't considered, and it's really they did. So there's this exercise that we do, and you kind of close your eyes and you hear they're like BBs being hit in a pan, and it shows how many individuals actually die from maybe doing heroin or even homicide, and then you hear how many people are dying from nicotine or cigarettes, and it's more than all combined. So it's really quite interesting, and I think it's a number that we don't talk about enough, that there are more people dying from smoking, and it's a preventable death, than heroin, homicide, and all these combined, which is pretty, if you think about it, it's pretty crazy to think about. But it's an addictive drug. I don't know if that's the proper term, but it's an addictive drug, right? Addictive chemical, and it's really quite hard for individuals to quit smoking. But we have resources available, and we will go over those a little bit at the end of this, where if people want to quit, what they can do. And then this just gives a little bit about how the aerosols created by the e-cigarettes. Again, some of the what's inside of them, and then that other website that we went through, we have some more information about the chemicals, right, that are in the products. They're unsafe, as we know, and we talked about the sudden infant death syndrome. So the known risks, again, it takes you back to this website. So if you're really interested, I know a lot of people are very interested in e-cigarettes. I know that every time I talk about tobacco prevention, nicotine, people want to know about e-cigarettes. I would go to this website and then, just take a look at what they have available. And then again, there's several places for the materials for the smoke-free environment, which again is the signage, so that they can put up. So we'll go ahead and watch this video. And this is about e-cigarettes.
Some say e-cigarettes aren't dangerous.
But science shows nicotine can harm teens' developing brains.
No matter how they're exposed.
Let's do an experiment to find out.
Here's a teen who won't be using e-cigarettes.
Now we need one willing to risk their brain development.
Anyone care to volunteer your kid?
Anyone?
Your kids are not an experiment. Protect them from e-cigarettes.
And so I think that this is a powerful message, right? They're not an experiment. And I think that that's exactly the way that it should be approached. It is an experiment. We don't know. And people will ask, I've gone to a bunch of conferences where people ask the people who are the experts at this, and they'll say, well, what happens? And the reality is we don't know what the long-term effects of this, what they are. And that's because they haven't been around long enough for us to see that. They know that there's obviously brain damage is one of the side effects, but we don't 100% know everything. There's something called popcorn lung, and that, happened when I guess the aerosols from a popcorn butter that was being used a long time ago caused people to get, I don't think it was lung cancer, but it did something to the lungs that was detrimental, lung disease in some way. And so that has been linked to the e-cigarettes. I think they're using the same chemical in it. So we don't know the long term. So we're becoming sort of this test subjects to try out. And it was the same for cigarettes. We didn't know in the past, they didn't have the research that said cigarettes were bad. And so we were penetrated. The market was penetrated with smoking everywhere, smoking signs. I mean, there's old tabloids that say it was good for your health to smoke, and it was accepted. And then we started seeing people get very sick, and now the message has changed completely. So we're still in what I would call a test phase of what e-cigarettes does, you know, and how it might harm individuals, which is it's crazy. Who wants to be, you know, the test subject? But again, the tobacco companies are really, really good at at kind of, I would say, tricking the masses, you know, into believing that it's good, it's okay, and there's nothing wrong with it, and it's better than smoking. And so we're battling that over and over again. And so I would go back on here and just take a look at some of these again, these videos. And then we have this, which is the resource for the 1-800-QUIT now. So we would love, you know, again, to get the parents to start thinking about quitting. We definitely don't want the children, as you heard, they're more likely to become smokers if their parents smoke, to start smoking, right? A whole new generation of smokers. We're trying to say, how do we protect the children, because they're the ones who are being targeted, and how do we protect the parents and support them if they want to quit smoking. So there's the coaching, and they do it online as well as one-on-one coaching, depending on how the individual wants to engage. And then they do provide nicotine replacement treatment, but I think it's dependent upon how much they smoke. So they go through a questionnaire before, and it's 24/7, and it's free help by the New Mexico Department of Health. So 1-800-QUIT now. There's a ton of resources on the Tobacco Use Prevention and Control Program. We're going to be doing another training on the resources that are available, because this is just one piece. This is really geared towards the protection of the children in secondhand smoke, and really getting the parents to take the pledge to smoke outside of the home and the car. And then I feel give the child a voice to be able to have the conversation and dialogue with individuals that might be exposing them or are in the space where they're exposed to secondhand smoke exposure. So we'll watch this video.
So how does a quit line work? It all starts with your desire to quit smoking and a phone call. You might talk to someone who will get some information from you, or you might talk to a quit coach from the beginning. They'll ask you a few starting questions, things like which state you live in, how much you smoke, and if you've tried to quit before, so they can make sure you get the help you need along with the services your state offers. Then they'll connect you with a quit coach who will help you put together your own personal quit plan.
So you're my quit coach today? How does that work?
I'm one of the people you'll work with. I'm here to answer your questions and offer strategies to help you quit based on what you need to be successful and what we know works.
How much does all of this cost?
Quitline services are free for callers, and we have lots of resources to help you. So if you're ready, we can start talking about setting a quit date.
Sure, but I'd like to know, is what we talk about private? Do you share any of what I say with my insurance or my job?
Everything we discuss is completely confidential. An exception would be if you mention an emergency or crisis that was a clear danger to you or someone else.
What if I can't do it? I don't want people to think I'm a failure if I try, but I can't quit.
Most people try to quit several times before they succeed. The most important thing is to try again.
Quitting smoking is hard, but it's possible, and quit lines can help you succeed.
I was really nervous calling the quit line for the first time. I never did anything like that before. But the person on the line was so friendly and helpful, it put me at ease right away.
Ready for your own quit line success story? Call 1-800-QUIT now or visit cdc.gov/quit to get started.
So I think the big message is that it is not easy for people to quit. And we don't judge, right? It's no judgment. It's really education more than anything. And I know as community health workers, you guys are really here to support families and the community in educating them and tapping them into the resources that are available for them. And that's what we want to do, is be a resource to them. So it's really, really, really difficult, and it takes several attempts. You know, they say up to 7, 8, but it could take more than that. And sometimes people they get tired of trying to quit, so they just give up on quitting, and they just say, forget it, I'm going to do this forever, you know, because it is that hard to do. So we're mindful of that, but we do want parents to know that, you know, we can support them if they need support, and that they can call into the 1-800-QUIT NOW. There's a bunch of other resources. We're almost finished here. What I want to just talk about is there's this health educator toolkit. And again, so we have this in Spanish as well. And then we have the Facebook link if you guys wanted to tap into the Facebook. But the health educator toolkit, which provides, it's just the resources that were throughout, that we saw throughout, but it's all in one spot if you guys wanted to come on here. And then we have, again, what secondhand smoke means to you. And then in Spanish as well, we have the parent's guide, and then the information sheet. Also the pledge cards here. So the pledge cards where, you know, the parents can print them out. And if you wanted, and I believe that the state, and I can find out for you guys if they have maybe like a packet that they can get together. But if you wanted to print those out or give those to the parents to take a pledge, they can do that. There's the activity sheet that was for the children. And then again, the no smoking sign. These are really helpful. The no smoking sign. And then you can download the entire toolkit if you wanted to keep it on your desktop or in a cloud, if you have the cloud or something like that to save it in. We'll just click on the Spanish here real quick so that you can see that everything is in Spanish as well. So we have some of the resources there, which is nice. And then you could go back. And then we do have for the 1-800-QUIT NOW as well, we do have Spanish as well. And here's the number for the Spanish speakers. Déjolo ya. I always get tongue-tied when I say that. So, so they can call that as well if they want to. If they speak Spanish. And there's also services for people who are hard of hearing. They have those services as well. So what I just would highly encourage is just go to the website. I've put the link here. It's www.areyoudoingenough.nm.com. I've put it in the chat. I know someone asked if there was if we could get the storybooks. I will find out from the Department of Health and then get back with you. I think that's pretty much it. We could wrap it up. And if you guys have questions, let me know. We can open it up for questions if you do have a few questions. Awesome. Well, I enjoyed and I'm grateful that you guys were here today. If you have any questions, what's going to happen next, I'll just let you know what's going to happen next, actually. What's going to happen next is that we will be, we will be sending out the evaluations for everybody who attended. You will just need to fill out the evaluation, and then you will get your certificate for your CEUs. And I believe, I can't remember the time frame, and I don't think Suzanne's still on here, how long it'll be before that, but if the evaluations will be sent out to you so you can take those. And yes, Loretta, go ahead, you can. Go ahead, Loretta. I think you can, if you can,
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Where can we get the coloring books? I'd like to put some at my community center.
Okay, so the resources, let me find out if I can put packages together. So the coloring book and the word find, is that what you're asking about?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I believe that we might be able to print out some resources and deliver them to you, but you can print them out for now on the website. If you go to the website, it's a downloadable PDF if you could print them out. And I will see if Tupac has those resources available for pickup. So let me find out, and then we'll do a follow-up email where you can find all of the resources that are offered on here.
Okay, I think a downloadable will be okay. I'm in New Mexico, so.
Oh, okay, yeah, and you could do that. You could download it.
Yep, I'll go ahead and do that. Thank you so much.
Oh,
this
yeah,
is a lot of information, and it's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining. Okay, and I think the storybook, they do have hard copies for sure. You can download that too, but that's kind of a lot. But I think they actually have the hard copies for the color or the storybook as well. Thank you very much for attending. Again, we will be sending out the evaluation, and then you guys can fill that out, and then you get your CEUs, and we will also be providing more to come. So be on the lookout for that. We will be having another training, and this is going to be on all of the resources provided through the Tobacco Use Prevention and Control Program. There's trainings online for health educators, and you guys can get CEUs through online as well. And so we want to make sure that we're tapping you into those resources. We'll be providing more CEUs for you guys in the future and to come. So have a great day, and we will be seeing you soon. Thank you.